It's on. No, because I have the highlights from the bios.
Okay. All right.
The interference. You know what? I may just turn it off. Yeah.
I think you can record it. You think it'll be interference?
Yeah. We just.
Oh, he said?
Yeah. Just to make sure.
Oh. Good evening. We're going to get started here. Everyone, please take your seats. Welcome, welcome. This is where we need to go. We're almost there. If we could encourage the people in the back here just to take these seats. There's a lot of seats up here front, all the way to the right. Thank you. So on behalf of the Wintrust family and the Community Impact Team, welcome to the Impact of Basketball. And tonight, this is about community in the broader sense. I don't want to block you too much. So when we think about community and everything that actions around their first job, their role models, buying a company, being a civic leader, serving on boards, writing a book, launching a show, all of those intersections, it's quite interesting if we take a deeper dive into that, isn't that true? So, and this is also fitting because in our impact mission, it's our mission to represent the Wintrust values by fostering partnerships where we can maximize our community relations efforts, where we can maximize our business development efforts, and fostering partnerships where we can maximize our employee engagement efforts. And there's a lot woven in there too. So now that you understand some of the why in this evolution of our impact series, we just want to get 2 dates in front of you before we dive into bios. We hope that you can come back for another intimate conversation led by Ed around the future of work, May 21st. And if you can come back September 24th on the impact of taxes. So we could all see how the intersection of these issues impact us all. So we're hosting these impact series to dive deeper. So now with that in mind and the why covered, I want to highlight a few tidbits from our speakers' bios. So Ashley, we're happy to have you with us. And Ashley is a 3-sport athlete and a role model who saw directly the benefits of the strong programs at the YMCA. So later, you had a job there as a lifeguard and a swim instructor. So that, no doubt, that intersection shaped who she is today. And we love to hear that because we take a deliberate focus to support strong and reputable programs, and the why is just one among many, many partners. And we're also eager to hear how your cross-section on the Portland Trailblazers and working there impacted you, and how that intersection and how it relates to your journey and career thereafter. So there's an exciting story there that Ed will dive into. And obviously for Mr. Thompson, we're happy to have Michael Thompson with us. And Michael Thompson is a business leader, a civic leader, over 20 years of experience in supply chain and operations. And now he's the owner of Fair Oaks Farms, so has an exciting story to share with us. And he gives back through his board service at the Greater Chicago Food Depository, Boys and Girls Club of Chicago, and Kenosha Business Alliance. And you're having an impact in Wisconsin and beyond. So we love our family, our Wintrust family in Wisconsin and the residents of Wisconsin, and we're able to serve them through 37 locations under the name of Town Bank there. So with that in mind, we're also happy to have Mr. BARDO with us, Stephen BARDO. And Mr. Stephen BARDO played overseas. He played for the Detroit Pistons, for the Dallas Mavericks, and the San Antonio Spurs. So we're excited to hear more about your story. And in a food town like Chicago, we love that you created that show, that you developed the show of the love for sports and food. So we're thrilled to hear about that. And no doubt that his intersection on and off the court will play a role in today's conversation, because he was able to provide context for his book on how we all want to plug into a league in our career path. So again, a lot there on and off the court. So with that glimpse into them and the why of how we're launching these Impact Series, we want to leave you with this dynamic, candid conversation led by our founder and CEO, Mr. Ed WEHMER. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I guess they wanted 4 great athletes up here. They could only find 3. I must be here for the food side of it. When it comes to playing basketball, I was a pulling guard. I couldn't really, you couldn't get an iPad under my feet for my vertical leap, but we appreciate everybody for being here. Susanna, thanks for taking us out tonight. This new Impact Series, we'd love to get your feedback on it, see if there's things we can do better. We really learn a lot from these, from the community and things that are needed in the communities, and as Chicago's bank and Milwaukee's bank, it's incumbent on us to learn from these and figure out how we can better serve the community and continue to get to our ultimate objective, and that's to be Chicago's bank. So thank you all for being here. We're going to start the first Impact one, as we said, about basketball. It's been one of our most popular pastimes for decades. For many, basketball is more than just a sport. It's more than just entertainment. It provides valuable life lessons on and off the court, hard work, practice, leadership, teamwork, being among them. Tonight we'll learn from some people who have felt its impact personally and professionally. So without further delay, let's get going. For all 3 of you, I have a question. What do you think playing basketball and sports in general does for a kid?
Ladies first, Ashley.
Okay, so my opinion, I believe that leadership and characteristics, it builds a foundation. So not only on the court, but also off of the court. So for example, we have many kids, many of you guys may have kids, and so they have studies and it keeps them rooted. So if I know I can't play if I don't pass, I'm going to do everything to excel in a classroom. And so that is a big, big key aspect for kids in this generation today.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think for kids, you know, young people, basketball is just an outstanding team sport. You learn team, you begin to learn discipline, and those are the key factors. I believe you build for success. Growing up, I'm an inner city kid from Chicago, South Sider. At the age of 13, I was 6'3". So I got dragged into the sport whether I liked it or not because I was just so tall. So, but the emphasis on team, it was phenomenal.
I think, I have the benefit of covering our young people in college basketball, and I think basketball creates toughness. because I think our young people are suffering from a lack of toughness. And basketball will teach you how to overcome adversity, how to work with people you don't like, how to do something from a coach that you possibly don't like, but because that's the real world. And so I think that basketball teaches real-world experiences that we all need to have.
Thank you. Michael and Stephen, you both played basketball and went on to build very successful careers. What lessons did you learn on the court that you brought to make into your business to make it successful?
I've been fortunate enough to translate everything in business into basketball terminology. And so any business challenge that I have, LaRue Martin, the #1 pick in the NBA draft, is here. Mark Aguirre, one of the top 50 players ever in the NBA, is here. Charlie Besser, I just saw him back here somewhere. President, CEO of Intersport. These people know what I'm talking about. And so when you can overlay any kind of business idea or challenge over what you know, what you've mastered, it allows you to learn almost anything. And so that's what basketball has done for me. There is no challenge that I find that I can't overcome because I can match my knowledge in basketball and apply it to anything that is challenging me.
Yeah, just tagging on to Steve, for me, persistence. You have to be persistent in business to be a winner. So persistence is probably the biggest lesson I learned overall. But another couple things. One is, you learn that losing is temporary. I mean, winning's temporary too, but losing's really temporary. If you gain a mindset of losing it being temporary, then you know you can overcome. There's another game, there's another deal, there's another opportunity coming around. And then the other thing that comes to mind for me is just the work ethic that I got out of learning the game, the discipline of that. It set my work ethic for life.
Charlie Besser. Charlie, what sport did you play? Where is he? Charlie, what did you play? I didn't know that about you, Charlie. I just, anyhow, we'll take it up later. My experience with sports is I played stuff where you had to run into somebody. It was fun. I've taken that into banking. It's full contact banking around here. But one of the reasons I started Wintrust was quality of life, and I wasn't home a lot. I had 5 kids at the time. We opened in Lake Forest. I was 5 minutes from where they went to school. Was able to coach everyone. I coached my sons in football, and then they said, you got to coach basketball, which was like the blind leading the blind. I was able to con a guy who knew basketball to come and help me. But I found that to be awesome, to be with my kids and to be able to coach them. And it really was a quality of life for me. But playing a sport can then become a family affair. How do you all see the sport impacting families?
Oh, I get to go on this one, I think it's a tool that binds. Basketball is a tool that binds. What do I mean by that? You know, when you have situations, if you have a child that's playing the sport and they have a terrible game and you have to get in the car and go home, and they may not want to hear a word you have to say, but they may just want mom or dad. You have to be smart enough to understand, do I talk about the game or am I mom and dad? Now, I messed that up. I've got 2 sons and they're 28 and 21. Thank goodness they didn't listen to me. But you have to, that's a thing that binds. Basketball can bind families. You can have great scenarios where my youngest got carried off the court for hitting a last-second shot, or you can have terrible scenarios where my oldest busted his nose and he's bleeding all over the place and his mom is about to be taken away in a straitjacket. And I have to walk up to him and be kind of calm because I don't want him to freak out. That's what basketball can bring.
To piggyback off of Steve, I believe that it can bring the family together. So for example, if you have one kid that plays basketball and you have other children that have not been introduced to sports, they see their bigger sister or bigger brother playing that sport and they're intrigued and they're like, I want to play, I want to learn. And so it brings a big family horizon together. Not only do you have your one child playing, but you can put the other kids in, and then you can be a volunteer coach, or you can referee or cheer at the games, different things like that for your kids. And so it brings the family together, so it becomes a lifelong of memories. So when you guys get together at Christmas, you'd be like, hey, remember you hit that three-pointer at the game-winning shot? So it just brings memories and everlasting memories. So it's things that you can talk about from 20 years from now.
Yeah, and for me, basketball is a team sport. To me, family is a team. You want your team to be respected. You want your family to be respected. You want your team to be successful. You want your family to be successful. And I think it's a good kind of pressure it puts on family members. You never want to let your family down. And I think so. Just thinking of the family as a team, the pure success of it all, I think it helps to build and bind families, as we just heard.
It's just the fact that it brings families together.
Yeah.
When the kids can be out doing whatever these days, but they can all go watch the game, and then they can play. They go out and they play in the driveway. Some of the best games at my house were I had a daughter who was a 3-sport athlete for 4 years at Loyola Academy. One of them was basketball. And she'd go out with her brothers, and they'd be going at it left and right. They come in. It was a lot of fun. And I think it just the fact that it's something they can do together, they can bind over. I think it's a wonderful thing. Stephen, you've played all over the world. What are the differences in playing overseas and here in the game itself? I remember John Mengelt was a friend of mine. Remember John Crash Mengelt? Played for the Bulls. After he played for the Bulls, he went over to Italy and played. He said, yeah, the big difference was that you got your paycheck from the last game before you'd play in the next game, and you got it right before the game started, or you wouldn't play.
Yeah, there's some stories like that. I'll refrain from those. I grew up a lot overseas. Basketball is quickly becoming the most popular sport in the world, only behind soccer. Most people don't know there are 54 countries around the world that pay basketball players to play professionally. That's 54 opportunities outside of the G League and the NBA. And a lot of people outside of the basketball community don't understand that. I was 21, 22 in Italy, Spain, Germany, France, Venezuela, Japan. Did I leave something out? Maybe I left one of those out. But I grew up in those places because sometimes I didn't understand the language. And so I picked up on nonverbal communication, which we learn in basketball. We know when someone's tired. We know when someone doesn't want to go to their left hand, so we make them go left. We know these things from basketball. So all I did was just transfer my skills over to, life skills in Italy, because I had my first child at the time with my wife. We didn't speak the language, and when you're protecting a child, you have to really pay attention. And if you don't know the language, you got to watch what's going on. And basketball really helped me do that. So that's one example.
How about the game itself?
The game itself is interesting because there's a lot required of Americans overseas that they're not necessarily required of the naturalized players. And so it can be a challenge. It's a double standard, and as long as you accept that going in, you may have some midnight runs, if you know what I mean. You all remember the movie Midnight Run, where the guy had to get out of the country late night? I had to do that with some money in one of the countries I won't name, because if I didn't, I wasn't going to get my money. There's a lot of different examples in certain parts of Europe where it's mob-backed, and so if you're not playing well and they have your passport, I've heard guys that have been threatened to not get their passports back unless they do certain things. And so if I wrote a book, it'll be under a pen name, but I'm sure I'll make a lot of money.
Ashley, basketball was invented in Hawaii, which And you as director of, as director of aquatics and sports at the Southside Y, what impact do you see the sport has had in your role day to day?
So the day-to-day basis at Southside YMCA, I feel like it's a safe space for individuals to come and play basketball. On a day-to-day basis, you see kids like crazy. After 4 o'clock, they just come rushing through, and you're like, hey, what's up? Hey, how you doing? And so it creates a safe space to keep these kids off of the streets because it's a lot of things going on the streets. And so to see them walk through the doors, it's very exciting. We also have a league called YBA. It's one of the most historical basketball leagues here in Chicago. 600 kids enrolled in one program is just amazing. Every Saturday, these kids came together and played the sport of basketball for hours. And so that's just a big impact in the community of basketball at the YMCA. We just started up YBA League last weekend. And so I'm getting to know these kids. They're getting to know me. I'm starting to know them by name. Zion, hey, because they come in on a day-to-day basis to the YMCA and just getting them better. It's bigger than basketball, though. It's building that relationship, making sure you're intentional with the kids and their families because they go through things outside of the doors and the brims of those 4 walls. And so making sure you're speaking and breaking down the game, but also asking them how they're doing, having those intentional conversations with those kids. And so I think they appreciate it. Like last night, I was at practice, and one of the kids, he was like, Coach Ashley, can you help me with my jump shot? He's in the 8th grade. He's going to high school next year, which basketball is a big, big thing here in Chicago. And I took out the time to stay an hour and a half later past what I wouldn't have done just to help him with his shot. And so it's bigger than basketball. It's relationships at the end of the day.
You must feel pretty good when you go home at night when you do that. It's easy to go home and feel good about that as opposed to foreclosing on an old lady like I do, you know. Just kidding, we don't do that here at Wintrust. Sorry. Picked the wrong month to quit drinking. There's a lot people can gain from sports and winning and the notoriety, but you can learn probably more through the successes you don't have. I guess the question would be, what lessons have you learned from failure and how have you built on them? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, failure. Nobody likes to fail, but you know, just the way I relate to that is failure. You know, again, I said it's losing is temporary, failure is temporary, but there is an accountability to failure. And I think you know, to Steve's point, it's one of those things that it toughens you up. I can remember in high school, and I went to Leo High School here on the south side.
Leo Lion.
Yeah, but you know, we lost my sophomore and junior year. When we lost a game, we came back to the school, and I don't know if what you know about Leo, but it's a 4-story high school with a pool in the basement. And we wore weight jackets for conditioning back then, and if we lost a game, my coach we'd get together, we'd go in the basement, put on weight jackets, and run stairs for an hour with a 40-pound weight jacket. So senior year, we were like 30-1. But that sophomore and junior year, it was just a lot of learning from that. So I didn't, you know, I thought it was punishment at the time, but you know, and that's what you think when you're a kid. But what you learn from it is, no, there's an accountability piece to failure.
I remember the Leo gym was one of the great high school gyms around. And
yeah.
You had to clap like this. You couldn't clap like that. There wasn't a lot of room. Yes, sir. Yeah. Tell me about your failures and what you got out of them.
Oh boy, where do I start?
If you had one, maybe.
Where do I start? It's ironic that I do what I do for a living. I cover college basketball for Fox and Big Ten Network, but a couple of the seasons that I played, I led the league in technical fouls because I was running my mouth in the wrong way. And so I guess, learning to get penalized some of your salary got me to straighten out and direct it in a more positive light. I'll share a story with you because I met one gentleman with his daughter here this evening, and he's an Illinois fan. We were on a legendary team, the 1988-89 Flying Illini. We had our own nickname. Thank you. And it was a legendary team. And the impetus of that team was sophomore year, we're in the second round of the NCAA tournament. We're up on Villanova by 10 points with about 1 minute and 50 seconds left. And Villanova starts fouling. And we go to the free throw line. First time Kenny Battle steps up to the line, he misses the front end of a 1-and-1. So typically, when you're in a 1-and-1 situation, you have to make the first free throw to get an opportunity to shoot the second free throw. But if you miss the first free throw, you've missed out on 2 points in that possession. So Nick misses the first one, they come down and hit a 2, they're down 8. I believe it was Lowell Hamilton got fouled next, he missed the front end of a 1-and-1, they came down and hit a 3, they're down 5. I got fouled, I hit 1 of 2, we're up 6. They come down and hit a 2, we're up 4. I believe Jens Kuyava got fouled, he missed the front end of a 1-and-1. They had a walk-on. Doug West was a first-round NBA draft pick. He had fouled out. He and his teammates had fouled out. They had a walk-on, hit a buzzer-beating 3 out of the corner to send us home. It was the most painful defeat that I think I'd ever been a part of. And that summer, like Michael talked about, holding yourself accountable, we worked as hard as we possibly could and then became probably a basket away from a national title the next year. But if we don't have that disappointment and loss the previous season, we don't have the success that we had, and I'm not doing the job I'm doing right now.
Ashley, you're up.
So to piggyback off these two, I have a similar story from failures. So as a freshman, I went to state. Not too many people get to go to state at all, so it was a big opportunity. I actually had the opportunity to play with Brittany Griner in high school. If any of you guys know who that is, she played for Baylor and plays for Phoenix right now. And so you can only imagine we're a stacked team. Basically, the people that are coming off on the next year are going D1. And so we're at state, we win the first night, so we get cocky, big head, stand up, playing. We're kids at the end of the day. I'm 14 years old at a state tournament. And so we go out the next day on Saturday. We're in Austin, Texas at the time, and we get on UT's floor, and we're playing Pflugerville. Pflugerville was the underdog. We were the top dog. We were undefeated at that time. And they came out. When I say they came out, they came out. And they weren't playing with us. They were undersized, but they had out-hustled us. And we, as a team, didn't play together. We didn't have that camaraderie that we had throughout the whole season. And so we end up losing by a good 11 points in the state championship game. There were a lot of tears, a lot of people upset because that was their last time playing because they were going off to college, and this was their first opportunity to win a state championship. But this wasn't my last rodeo. I still had 3 more years to go. And so coming off of that, we went back, came into summer. We were at open gym every day that following summer and kind of build it from there because we weren't going to have that stacked team next year. The tallest person on the team was 6'1", and she you had to work with her. coming back into that next year, we were the underdogs coming into to that district, and so we made some noise that year. But it taught us a lot not to get so big-headed as individuals, because just as quick as you won, you can also lose. So you just have to continue to be structured and not get so big-headed.
Let me add something. Ashley didn't add this. The lady she's referring to is one of the top players to ever play the game on the women's side. Brittany Griner is 6'8", can dunk like any man in the NBA. Very, very talented. So I didn't mean to steal nothing from you, but I want to let them know. You said Brittany Griner, I think you thought that everybody knew who that was, but just to give you a little bit of background.
We'll go off script here for a moment, and we won't talk about sausages, I promise. But
You can talk about sausage.
But we had a little meeting before we came out here, and we were discussing the paying of college players, and we had 3 different divergent views on it, and thought it'd be interesting if you shared that with the crowd. I don't know who wants to go first.
We'll let Steve go first on this.
You sure you want to let me go first?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I played 4 years at the University of Illinois, and there's a current argument that says these players get their college education paid for, and they get all of these different things that come along with it. And my argument is that I paid for my college tuition, fees, and everything else in my 9th game of my freshman year. I started 4 years. So for 3.5 years, the university made money, tangible money, off of what I was doing. I have injuries to this day from that time that I deal with. And so the fact that everywhere else in the United States, when someone creates a product and they can benefit in the profit from it, but that doesn't seem to happen in college football and college basketball, I have a problem with that. I think that the new measures that the NCAA have basically been forced into abiding by, in terms of allowing the players, because I'm not going to call them student athletes anymore, because that was a term derived by the NCAA to avoid litigation. So I'm going to call them players who happen to go to school. So there's a SB 206 measure out of the state of California that's going to allow these players to make money off their likeness. So understand this. I want to say this clearly, because all of you all will hear this stuff come out, and people will get upset because it sounds like the university is going to pay players. That is incorrect. It is allowing players to make money off their face and likeness. It requires that universities pay $0. It doesn't change the structure at all for them. So when you hear that narrative come out, you remember what I'm saying, because that's a popular narrative that goes on that's incorrect. So I am all for these players getting paid, because there was a study, and I'll be brief, where the top 25 universities in 2017, the top 25 men's basketball programs, were calculated in the money that they made. And if they took a similar structure as the NBA agreement that they have with their players, that the University of Illinois, each one of the 15 players would make $480,000 a year. Think about that for a second. The University of Louisville is the most profitable men's basketball program in the nation. In 2017, every one of their players, under this agreement, where the university would get 56% and the players would get the remaining percent, each player would make $1.5 million in college, with the other 56% going to the universities. So that's where I stand on players getting paid.
Two things I think about that. One is we have to get our college account ready for these kids. They got $1.5 million, that'd be pretty good. Secondly, on your likeness, I wouldn't have made a dime.
Well, and that's why I wanted Steve to go first. He's a lot closer to it and knows a lot more about it than I do. Back when I played, which is a long time ago, we were more the student athletes that he was talking about. And I went to an Ivy League school. It wasn't an income-generating program for sports, but the lessons are still there.
So I had a different perspective from Steve.
Which is good.
So I feel like student athletes shouldn't be paid. Reason being because I just graduated about 3 years ago. Typically, when you go in as a student athlete, you get your college education paid for, but also you get a stipend. Most people don't know you get a stipend. Do you guys know you get a stipend in college? So every month, you get basically paid. You get a paycheck because you can't work an outside job because your job is basketball and being a student. I understand what Steve's saying with the generating of revenue and things of that nature, but also NCAA just cut a check.
That I didn't get.
He didn't get his
stipend. Talk about that.
So that's something that I said also. So they're tracking their steps and paying individuals, but the only sports that are getting paid are basketball and football because those are the two generating sports, despite like soccer, baseball, softball, because some programs do have those top sports in their programs, and football and basketball are not their top sport at all. And for example, I can go back to the University of Houston. I went to the University of Houston. Football excelled. Basketball, they're on the rise. Last year we did really well if you guys watched March Madness. But our baseball program took off. Our baseball program's been successful for about a good 15 years. So that just shows the equivalence that the focus is more on the heavy sport of football and basketball, but not all sports. So.
True.
It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I think that the NCAA's rules are so obtuse. I mean, I think a kid can, sign a shirt and get nailed and not be able to play. I mean, things like that, that a young kid is not going to know all the rules, supposed to know them all, but they're kids. I think if they simplified it and worked the stipends, I think that might be a better way to do it. So, and then make it even, so you can't have, Notre Dame paying more than Georgetown or somebody in football. So, anyhow. You think about basketball and professional sports and kids. You think that many kids think they want to play in the NBA or play professional baseball or football or some sport. The odds of that happening are very slim to none. But we talked earlier, but you get many other opportunities that come from it. What are some of the best opportunities you've seen for other people coming from sports, from playing sports, and how it affected their lives going forward?
Well, for me, I think, so I was one of those athletes. I wasn't ever the top-notch athlete. I was good. I wasn't great. But I gained so much from playing in the sport. It just helped me tremendously. I mean, first of all, just think about recruiting. I'm not talking about basketball recruiting. I'm talking about recruiting for jobs, period. The companies that came to school, to Cornell, they wanted to know who were the athletes. That was a big deal if you played for the team because they know what you had gone through to be successful. So they were really quite interested if you were on the team, if you played a sport, et cetera, which to me, helps you get a better job when you're trying to get out there and make yourself successful. I mean, I realized, I wasn't going to be a professional athlete. So looking at my options, it was like, okay, I've gone to a great school. I've got a lot of things in front of me that are going to help develop me and get me going in my life. So in terms of your dreams as a child, it goes from, I thought I was going to be that professional athlete like many other young people do, and then you realize it's not going to happen. So now you go, well, I got the rest of my life. What am I going to do with it? So hopefully you make good, decent choices, get a great start for life, and then you use those lessons and that discipline and that persistence to catapult yourself from position to position. You run against the same things, all the adversity that both these folks are talking about. You hit them in the job world. Everybody sitting out here knows that. So how do you leverage them? And basketball was a tremendous leveraging tool for me to get to higher levels and be successful.
Just the discipline you get, your time management, discipline that you come out of high school and you're laying upside down on the couch and grunting and groaning and figuring out where you're going to get your next beer. You got something to do, It's in the discipline you have to learn to manage your time. Before, with me, it was before you had, iPhones and that sort of thing. You had to actually have a little book you wrote it in to remember. Either one of you have an answer? Want to respond to this?
So I have an answer. I believe that playing sports in general helps with being taken all over the world. So from a young age, you're on a travel baseball team, travel basketball team, travel soccer team, travel gymnastics, like all of these sports. You're traveling around the world. That's building rapport of networking. You start networking at a young age, but you don't know you're networking, if that makes sense. So when you're out, people know who you are, but you don't know who they are. And so as you become older and older, you become visible, and you are standing in front of the same people that watch you grow up as an individual. And so, for example, to piggyback off of him, when you're at the career fairs, so Enterprise is a big advocate for athletes. They want athletes. It's a teamwork environment. You have to be able to trigger data, go get cars, like any given day is different, and that's the same thing in practice. You never know what you're going to get when you come to practice. And so a lot of these jobs want people that can think on the fly. Hey, I can ask them to do it because I know they'll have a resolution for it. And so just from my experience, I've been taken all over the world. I've been able to network in many different spaces. So when I was in college, I had the opportunity to go to the Olympic Center, Team USA in Colorado. I spent 2 weeks there. It was an amazing experience, and I was also exposed to a lot of different people in that atmosphere. And so from there, that triggered opportunity to go work at NASCAR. Working at NASCAR on a contract, working in HR. My first job out of college, I only did an internship for 3 months. Never had worked before that in a capacity of corporate. And so going from that, my boss, Paula, introduced me to someone in the NBA, and then I got a job with the Portland Trail Blazers. And so being able to be a networking tool is very important because you never know who you're going to be in front of any given day. So you have to always be on so you can get where you need to be and always excel in those places and spaces that you get in. So I think it's all about networking, and you're always networking. Your 4 or 5 year old, they're networking already. Someone's looking at them right now saying, this is going to be the next this. And so we're always networking.
I think basketball, the intersection of basketball, social media, and traditional media has been fascinating. If you've seen recently retired players like Darius Miles and Quentin Richardson with the Knuckleheads podcast, they do this. That's their sign for their podcast. And it's one of the fastest growing podcasts in the country. I think Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson have a podcast that is really starting to take off because people want to hear from these former players. They want to hear from the current players as well, but they want to hear these stories, these rich stories from these players. And these guys are really taking advantage of this new media, combining social media with these new media forms, podcasting. We're doing Facebook Live right now. I have a couple shows I do on Facebook Live. And, it's a fascinating time to see these former players have the type of success that they're having simply because of their exposure, like Ashley was talking about and Mike was talking about. We look different. We stand out. So wherever we are, we're going to have a presence. LaRue Martin is almost 7 foot tall, and you could look at him and know that he did something hooping. He was a baller, and he has a presence, and he has a following. And so it's fascinating for me to see some of our younger brethren, younger players. I'm missing out on one. J.J. Redick has an excellent podcast where he gets a lot of different people. The late, great Kobe Bryant, may his soul rest in peace, won an award for his short film, Dear Basketball. I encourage you all to look at it if you haven't done so. These new media forms, basketball players are really, really taking advantage of it.
I have one quick question, then we have maybe time for some questions out here. What do you think of the move now that when you have kids, they have one sport? I mean, when I went to school, you had 2 or 3 you played. And I always remember, you meet with your old teammates, and you can go back. It's like you were always there, you know. Man, the glory days are fun. What do you think of that? What do you think that does? Ashley, you deal with it every day. You were a multi-sport athlete. Wasn't that cool?
I wasn't the greatest at every sport that I played, but I was intrigued on how the sport was played. So, for example, I seen some of my friends, I was about 5 years old. They were on a swim team. They were on our swim team in our neighborhood. And I was like, I wanna swim. And I knew how to swim. And so my parents put me on a competitive swim team, and it just kind of went up from there because I seen some of my friends do it, and I wanted to be in a sport with them so we could do it together. And 13 years later, I was a competitive swimmer, 3-year letter just in swimming. Mm-hmm. And so that was just an opportunity right there, playing soccer. I had never played soccer a day in my life. Got to middle school, the sport was offered. I was like, I'm gonna go out and try. And I made the team and played that. I think it just comes from being open. You have to have an open mind. You can't limit your horizon around you because you never know what opportunity may come from it. And so being athletic, it just became natural to me, but some people need work with it, but as long as you have fun and you enjoy it, I think that's all that matters in it.
I mean, for me, I think the exposure is great because I think, when you're growing up, you don't really know what you're going to be good at. So until you get exposure of several things, then you really don't know. I mean, I only lettered in one, but I participated in 2 others, and that was cross country and tennis. Primarily cross country was just conditioning because I grew up under some conditioning nuts. But it really worked well because, from the team standpoint, we won a lot of games based on just outrunning the other team.
And you actually acclimated really well because you had more friends from school that were teammates, right? I mean,
yes, very true.
I think that's what's missing these days. Any thought on that?
Well, I was a lot like Ashley and Michael, where I played it, whatever sport, whatever season it was, that was the sport I was playing.
Yeah.
And I think Charlie Besser can speak to this as well because he does a lot around college sports. You're seeing younger players get injured in ways that traditionally had been deeper into their career. And what I think is just a theory, but I think they're going and having too many repetitive movements because our parents are brainwashed into thinking that their child is going to make some money doing a sport. And so our generation of parents have failed mathematics because all you have to do is figure out that there are 400 players in the NBA.
Right.
So I don't understand why you have to single your child into basketball at the 1st grade, why they can't get exposed to volleyball, golf, tennis, soccer, all these lacrosse, rugby, your sport, all these different sports that can give them not only a different training on their bodies, their young, developing bodies, but it can work different angles of their brain. They can work different aspects of their personality with different people. And I think that's kind of hurting our kids because we don't do like we used to back in the day. Whatever season was, that's the sport I'm playing.
Yeah. We have time for questions. Susanna has a microphone. Anybody have a question? Oh.
Good evening, everyone. Steve, how you doing? It's been a long time. Shane Kerr, my brother.
Oh, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Blinded by the lights.
All right.
But one of the things I want to talk about is something that we emphasize in our youth program is the transition. And we emphasize transition because we know one day if you are in a sport, that sport's going to end. So I was wondering if you all can kind of speak on the impact of your particular sport, which is talking about basketball, and how you transitioned from that into your adulthood, into a career.
Well, my transition was really early because I never played professional sports. So, but you know, again, as I mentioned, I think, you know, I don't know, I would call it transition. It's more to me, it's moving on in life. It's like, you know, that door closed once you realize, you know, for me, it wasn't going to be professional sports. It's like, how do I make the most out of my life? How do I gain and keep gaining and keep gaining? And the drive that I learned in basketball just continued that drive. I mean, it's one success story after another. A lot of failures in between, but you know how to keep going because you've learned the discipline to do that. So, you know, again, transition, yeah, I think that's a good word for it. But I just look at it as moving on, you know, getting on with it and being more successful.
I've had several teammates that have had a hard time with that transition. I've had several friends that are former NBA players that have been out for a while, and they still struggle. There's one person in particular that comes to mind that had over a decade's worth of NBA experience. And I asked him to join me on a trip, maybe a year or two after he finished playing. And he had a hard time making reservations, of looking on airline aggregate sites or figuring out what was the best time for him, because everything had been done for him in the NBA. And so I think that that transition piece is huge for guys and ladies at that level. My experience with covering the WNBA with the ladies are much smarter than us in terms of the end will come. They handle it much better. They prepare themselves while they're still playing. That was something I was able to do only because of the guidance of my father. But a lot of players don't have that opportunity. Nobody's in their ear telling them that because they're getting exploited, if you know what I mean. And so if you have a player that is a little bit more educated while he's going through the process, that player may start asking questions and, you know, upset the apple cart. So I'll leave that on that tangent. But in terms of the transition, it's critical that the players that reach a certain level, the NBA, the NFL, have these transition skills, because you guys, I'm trying to explain this to you. I think our panelist, Mark Aguirre, definitely knows what I'm talking about. LaRue Martin definitely knows what I'm talking about. There is nothing like the energy of 15 to 20,000 people focused on you and your every movement and every basket and every missed basket. That 15,000 to 20,000 people have a response, and you feel the brunt of that response. It's an amazing feeling, and it will never be replicated. I don't care what you do. You cannot replicate it. And that's the part that I think that former players have the most difficult time with, is they can't seem to figure out that feeling is never coming back. And they don't know how to transition that want of that feeling into something that they're good at. And so that's where the transition piece would come in.
Question?
Hi, Stephen. Hi, panel. How are you? I'm really happy with what I'm hearing from you guys. Thank you for everything you're saying today. But I want to kind of key in on something that, you know, I'm kind of an out-of-the-box kind of thinker. I don't know why, but it's that way. Actually, when you mentioned earlier when you were networking at the age of 7, 9, Stephen, you talked about also, all you guys talked about it. And, you know, my question is, as I think about it all the time, is that, you know, we talk about the 400 players that are on the court, but, you know, in my eyes, I think that we should think broader when we're talking to youngsters about the sport, any sport, because it's not just a 400. When you talk about a Chicago Bulls, and you talk about a franchise, it needs to be the business of sports. You know, every kid is not going to be Jordan. But you know what? I'm around it at a young age. Why didn't somebody tell me about, I mean, you're broadcasting. There's guys behind the camera. There's guys upstairs doing stats. There's guys doing, there's 500 people in the Bulls Stadium, and it's all about the business of sports. So I think that we're so close to it at a young age, but we're not taught anything about what makes this thing run. You know, there's so many things that go on. Now you're with the Portland Trailblazers, right? Am I correct?
I used to be.
Okay, well, you used to be. But what I'm saying is that to have that knowledge early about the business of sports, not just being the athlete in sports, I think that if you learn it early, in some athletes, there might be an easier transition if I know something I've been around all my life, if I know a little bit about that, if I know a little bit about this. So that's just thinking outside the box when I think, and I just want to get you guys' response to seeing, you know, if you think it's a tangible thought or not. But I kind of think we should be taught early, you know, about the business of sports.
I agree. I think it comes with exposure, and it starts in the household. So it's a question to ask. How did you learn about work? So how did you learn about work? Yes.
About working?
Like working, going to work. How did you learn about that?
My mom told me I had to do it.
But who did you see? But who did you see go to work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Your parents every day they had a responsibility. But what I'm really asking is that I'm in it. I mean, when I was a 12-year-old, I'm playing basketball, but I have no idea what's behind that franchise. You know, I don't know. But there's, you know, statisticians. You've been with the Portland Trailblazers. How many people do they employ? You know, I mean, I'm just asking. I don't know. And I think that for young athletes, if that was brought to them, to say that, hey, you want to be a professional athlete, but let me tell you what goes on in the, you know, the Chicago Bears Stadium. Let me tell you what goes on. These people do that. These people do that. These people do this. Mm-hmm. You're already in sports. I mean, this is just me thinking out the box. I don't want to know if...
Yeah, your point is an excellent point, and I know exactly where you're coming from, but I do believe Ashley hit on it. I mean, it's really exposure. You know, my father was one of the first African-American police officers in the city of Chicago. His bank was Hyde Park Bank in Hyde Park.
A Wintrust Bank, by the way.
And I was telling Ed, you know, earlier, I remember every Saturday he would take me in hand, and there are 6 of us, 6 kids, but, you know, I wound up going with him a lot of times, and we would go hand in hand into the Hyde Park Bank. And you look at the structure, I mean, it's very similar to this place, and you go, oh my God, you know, what is this? How does this work? You know, so I think, you know, to her point of exposure, that's what gets you there. And it helps you make those transitions. I mean, you know, for me, a transition from a corporate employee to a business owner, that's a hard transition.
I don't want to take up time, but I'm saying you had exposure.
Yes.
And if I'm not alone in a parking lot, if I'm playing sports, I have exposure.
Let me answer that, Mark.
I mean, maybe I'm in the wrong.
No, you're not.
I have exposure to everybody.
Okay, so I make sure you give him. We're gonna have a back and forth here. No. I'm just saying, because here, this is gonna be a great example, because what happens is you were so focused, like I was, because you can't be looking this way and be good at what you're doing. You're top 50 ever to play, Mark. You couldn't be looking side to side. You had to be looking at dead ahead, or you can't be the best. And we're driven. So especially from young black players from the inner cities in these urban areas, it's like a survival thing. When you go to play, it's different in the communities. It's different. It's like you got bragging rights. You might have physical altercations. There's a lot that goes into that people don't really talk about. And so, Mark, I know what you're saying. My dad's a college professor. He was an interim athletic director at SIU twice, right? So I knew about the college scene because my dad was in it. That's it. But when I was trying to play professionally, I wasn't looking at media. I wasn't looking at broadcast. I wasn't looking at all that stuff because I'm barely making a living trying to get on this team. You know what I mean? And so I get what you're saying, but consider this. Yeah, but basketball and music parallel each other, okay? So when you look at Master P or you look at Nipsey Hussle, God rest his soul, these guys had to go from illegal to legal, and they had to pay money to get on the legal side. So they had uncanny intelligence to be able to move from the music scene to get on the business side, right? They had to have a different level of intelligence. I think the players are starting to come into that because they're getting exposure to that with the internet. But before the internet, you weren't going to be exposed. You couldn't see somebody else's life outside of that.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's part of it. But what you're saying is very valid.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, a good banker can help you too. But we have time for one more question, I think. Is there one more?
Oh, no, you were raising your hand.
She said I'm loud.
Okay, I just want to go back to exposure. I think that it is our charge as all of us in our room with all of our fancy college degrees and everything that we get back and we mentor our children. So yesterday I had an opportunity to participate in World Read Aloud Day in Inglewood yesterday. And so what I decided to do was read poems about black poets, and one of them was Dreams by Langston Hughes. And at the end I asked all the students, like, what are your dreams? And a lot of them were like, oh, I want to be a basketball player, or, you know, I wanted to do something in sports. And I said, that's great, but what is your backup plan? And so we started talking about their backup plan. I let them know, you know, my brother he's an attorney, and now he's a sports agent. So think about what your backup plan is going to be. And so I think that all of us in this room, I charge all of us to get out there and mentor, and we can expose these students so that we can help them to really think about strategically their careers and take advantage of those opportunities.
There you go. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I hope you found it all informative. Speaking of work, I guess the next one is to be the future of work, which hopefully might be retirement for me down the road. I'm not sure, but and then later in the fall, we're going to put something on somewhat controversial, but we're not going to make it political. It's going to be the pros and cons of the what do they call it, the fair tax bill in Illinois. There's two sides on this. We're not going to make it political. We just want facts. We're trying to get two people who won't get all worked up on it, just to tell the facts and let people then decide what they're, because it's so hard to get the facts these days on anything. I don't know. I can't find them. There's so much stuff out there. But so it's going to be a little bit of a walk down a perilous lane for us, but because as a bank, we are apolitical. We service everybody. But we think it's important to get to have this discussion. So hopefully you'll join us there. I'll leave a little bit of commercial. If you're not banking to Wintrust, you just think you're having a good time. So thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, panel. Thank you.